Jian Siwan had everything a man could want. Power. The kind that made senators nervous and police commissioners change the subject. Wealth, so deep it had stopped feeling like money and started feeling like weather. Something that was simply always there. Respect, the dangerous kind, where men didn't clap when he walked into a room. They went quiet. And in this world, silence was the highest honor. But there was one thing missing, one wound that all his power couldn't close. 8 months ago, his wife had disappeared, just vanished, like she was never there at all. And tonight, in the last place on earth he expected, he was about to see her again. But not in the way he ever imagined. The restaurant was called Onyx, and it was the finest establishment in all of Houston, Texas. Black marble floors that reflected the chandelier light like still water. Crystal so clear it looked like frozen air. Every table cost more to sit at than most people made in a week. Governors had eaten there. Oil billionaires had proposed there. And John Siwan, known in the streets and boardrooms of Houston as simply the chairman, owned it. Not openly. Nothing Siwan owned was open. His name was buried under 3 companies, each one cleaner than the last. But make no mistake, every inch of Onyx, from the obsidian tabletops to the Korean pear wine in the cellar, belonged to him. He walked through the front door at exactly 8 o'clock. His companion, a woman named Diane, walked beside him in a red dress that caught every eye in the room. Mr. Jean. The restaurant manager appeared immediately, bowing slightly. Your table is ready. The best one, of course. They were seated near the window. The city of Houston sparkled below them like scattered diamonds. Siwan pulled out his phone. Diane's smile tightened. Can you please put that away? Just for one evening? I'm working, Siwan said. You're always working. He put the phone down. Not because she asked, because he had started thinking about something else. Someone else. The way he always did when he sat in a restaurant. The memory of coming home 8 months ago to an apartment so empty it echoed. His wife, Amara, gone. No note, no call, no explanation. Just absence, sudden and total, like a light switched off. He pushed the thought away. She left. She didn't care. That was the end of the story. Just then, someone approached their table. Siwan didn't look up. He was studying the menu. Even though he had it memorized, he'd owned this place for 4 years. Good evening. Welcome to Onyx. Can I start you with something to drink? The voice was quiet, polite, professional, but something about it stopped the air in Siwan's lungs. He knew that voice. Slowly, very slowly, John Siwan raised his eyes from the menu, and his entire world stopped. Standing beside his table, holding a notepad, wearing the black and white uniform of Onyx's serving staff, was his wife, Amara. But that was not the most shocking part. She was pregnant. Very, very pregnant. Time didn't slow down. It didn't speed up. It simply ceased to exist. The restaurant noise went somewhere far away. Siwan could not breathe. His heart, the heart that men said he didn't have, was slamming against his ribs with a force that almost hurt. Amara stood there, her face showing nothing. Her hand held the pen perfectly steady above her notepad. Her uniform was pressed. Her posture was professional. She was the picture of composure, and she was looking at him like he was a stranger. For one terrible, frozen moment, their eyes met. Siwan saw the woman he had lost. He saw pain he did not understand. He saw a face that used to turn toward him when he walked into a room, now pointed carefully, deliberately away from him, like a compass refusing to find north. But most of all, he saw her, round, unmistakable, 8 months gone at least. She's pregnant. The thought arrived like a blade. Whose baby? When did this happen? How long has she been? But deep inside, in a place beneath calculation and control, he already knew. He was already counting backward, already doing the arithmetic that would confirm what part of him already understood. Saiwan. Diane's voice came from somewhere distant. You look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong? He couldn't speak. Amara's face remained perfectly calm. She was a waitress. He was a customer. That was the entire universe as she was choosing to present it. Sir? Amara said, her voice steady and soft and utterly unbothered. What can I get you to drink? That voice. The same voice that used to say his name differently than anyone else in the world did. With warmth. With ease, like it belonged in her mouth. Now it was professional. Distant. The voice of someone serving a customer. Diane looked between them, her expression shifting. Do you two know each other? Siwan found his voice. It came out lower than he intended, almost rough. Amara. For just 1 second, something moved behind her eyes. A flicker. There and gone so fast he almost missed it. Pain, maybe. Or the specific kind of fear that comes from being found when you have been hiding. Then it was gone. I'll come back when you're ready to order, she said, and began to turn away. Wait. Siwan stood up, not the way ordinary men stand. He rose from that chair with the controlled, quiet power of a man who had spent 15 years making every movement deliberate, every gesture calculated, but his hands, hidden at his sides, were not calm. His hands were shaking. Every person within 3 tables turned to look. Amara stopped. She did not turn around. What are you doing here? The words came out before he could shape them into something more composed. Where have you been? Why did you leave? What? His eyes dropped to the impossible curve beneath her uniform. Is that Saiwan? Diane's voice was sharp now. People are staring. He didn't care. He had never in his adult life not cared about composure, about image, about the performance of control. He cared about none of it right now. Amara turned back to face him slowly. She looked tired. Not the tired of a long shift. Something deeper. A tiredness that had settled into the bones, into the space behind the eyes. She had lost weight everywhere except where she hadn't. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her hands, he noticed because he noticed everything, had the small cuts and rough patches of someone who worked with them constantly. I'm working, sir, she said. That last word. Sir, like he was nobody to her. The restaurant manager materialized beside them with the speed of someone trained to manage exactly this kind of situation. Is there a problem here? No problem, Amara said immediately. I was just taking their order. Saiwan. Diane grabbed his arm. You are embarrassing me. Sit down. Right now. The manager looked at Saiwan with the particular expression of a man who has just remembered that the person he is managing is also the man who signs his checks. Mr. Jean, is everything all right? The entire restaurant was watching. Siwan had 2 choices. Make a scene or sit down. His legs felt strange beneath him. He sat. Everything is fine, he said. His voice came out hollow. The manager nodded carefully. Perhaps another server should... Yes, Amara said quickly. I'll send someone else. And she walked away, unmoving through the tables with smooth, practiced calm, and disappeared through the kitchen door. Siwan watched her go. Come back, something in him said, the part of him he spent years training into silence. Come back. Don't disappear again. Tell me what happened. But she was already gone. Diane leaned close, her voice sharp and quiet. Who was that? He didn't answer. How do you know her? She stopped. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God, is that her? Is that your ex-wife? 8 months. 8 months he had told himself she was gone and good riddance. 8 months, he had rebuilt his walls and gone back to work and let his lieutenants believe he didn't feel anything. And here she was, working as a waitress in his own restaurant, pregnant, looking at him like he was no one. "That's her, isn't it?" Diane's voice was getting louder. "That's the one who left you, and she's pregnant." Her voice cracked. "Is that your baby?" "I don't know," Siwan said. Barely a whisper. Diane stood up so fast her chair scraped back. Every head turned. "You don't know?" Her hands were trembling. "I have been sitting across from you for 6 months, Siwan. 6 months, and the whole time?" She grabbed her bag. "This is humiliating." "Diane, sit down." "I saw the way you looked at her." Her voice was tight with something past anger. "Like the rest of the room stopped existing. Like I wasn't even here." Tears gathered in her eyes. Not soft tears, furious ones. "Don't call me. Don't text me. We're done." And she walked out. Her heels struck the marble floor like small gunshots. Every eye in Onyx followed her to the door. Siwan sat alone at the table. The business deal he was supposed to discuss tonight, worth $40 million, felt like a note someone had passed him in a language he no longer spoke. His power, his name, the weight of everything he had built. None of it was in the room with him. The only thing that mattered was behind that kitchen door. He waited 5 minutes. Then 10. A different server came to ask if he wanted to order. Siwan waved him away without speaking. At 15 minutes, he stood up. The manager stepped forward. "Mr. Jean, perhaps—" "Move," Siwan said quietly. The manager moved. Siwan pushed through the kitchen doors. Inside, it was heat and noise and the controlled chaos of a professional kitchen mid-service. Line cooks called out orders. Pans crackled. Steam rose from every surface. It was the one part of his restaurant he almost never entered. And there, in the corner, on a small stool near the prep station, away from everyone, sat Amara. Her face was in her hands. Her shoulders were moving. She was crying. Siwan stopped walking. He had seen many things in his life. Violence, betrayal. Things that would have broken other men. He had watched with his same still face through all of it. But seeing her like this, small, exhausted, her uniform too big, her hands rough from work, crying in the corner of a kitchen. Something in his chest cracked open along a seam he didn't know was there. He walked toward her slowly. "Amara." Her head snapped up. She saw him and wiped her eyes in one fast motion and was on her feet before he'd taken another step. "You cannot be back here." Her voice shook only slightly. This area is staff only. I don't care about the rules." "You own this place, Siwan. You wrote the rules." "Then I'm rewriting them. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." She moved to step past him. He stepped with her, not grabbing, not blocking, just present. A wall of stillness she would have to walk through to leave. "Please," he said. 5 minutes. A large line cook looked over at them with the quiet readiness of someone who has stepped in before. "You need help, Amara?" "She's fine, Marcus," Siwan said without looking away from her. "I'll decide if I'm fine," Amara said. And then to Marcus. "It's all right. He's leaving." But Siwan didn't move. He was looking at her, really looking, the way he had not allowed himself to for 8 months. The way he had trained himself not to every time her face tried to surface in his mind. The woman he remembered had worn silk and laughed in the particular way that made other people want to know what she found funny. She'd had an ease about her that he had never been able to match. A warmth he had spent their entire marriage standing slightly outside of, wanting in. This woman was different. Smaller somehow, heavier in her eyes. Still beautiful, the way certain things remain beautiful even after they've been through weather. But changed. He had done this to her. Whatever this was, he was part of it. The baby, he said quietly. Is it mine? Amara's jaw tightened. That is none of your business. None of my... He stopped himself, rebuilt himself, lowered his voice to something controlled. You're still my wife. Amara. Was, she said. The word landed between them like something dropped from a height. Past tense. I was your wife. We never divorced. You disappeared. And whose fault is that? The bitterness in her voice was not the kind that comes from nowhere. That was the bitterness of someone who had swallowed something painful for a very long time. Siwon stepped back, looked at her. You're the one who left. I came home and you were gone. No note, no call. I had people looking for you, Amara. Do you understand that? I had people looking. People, she said, and the way she said it, with a look that knew exactly what people meant in his world, stopped him cold. I thought something had happened to you. Something did happen to me. Her voice broke slightly on the last word, the first crack in the wall. Something happened, and you were too deep in your world to see any of it. The kitchen manager approached. I'm sorry, but I need to ask you both. We're leaving, Siwon said. I'm not going anywhere with you. You need this job? He looked at her directly. I'll pay you what you would have made tonight, 3 times over. Name the number. Something crossed her face. Not gratitude. The opposite. You think money fixes everything? She said, very quietly. That is exactly what you think. You always have. She took off her apron, folded it, and set it on the prep counter. I'm taking my break, she said to the kitchen manager, and she walked toward the back door. Siwon followed her into the alley. It was dark. A single bulb hung over the door. The smell of a city's kitchen, oil, steam, new concrete, hung in the warm Houston air. Amara leaned against the brick wall, one hand resting on the curve of her belly, and looked up at the dark sky like she was searching it for patience. She looked exhausted in a way that sleep alone wouldn't fix. 5 minutes, she said. That's what you get. Siwon stood across from her. He had negotiated with men who wanted him dead. He had sat in rooms where the wrong word could end a life. He had never, in any of those moments, felt as completely without footing as he did right now. Why did you leave? He finally asked. Amara kept her eyes on the sky. Because I had to. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. The baby. He tried again. Just tell me. Is it mine? She was quiet for a long moment. The city moved around them, indifferent and enormous. Then, a very softly, yes. The word hit him somewhere between the ribs. His. The baby was his. She was standing in an alley behind his restaurant, pregnant with his child, in a waitress uniform, looking at him like he was someone she had survived. When did you find out? About a week before I left. He counted backward. So you've been pregnant for 8 months, almost 9. 9 months. She had been carrying his child for 9 months, and he had not known. He had sat in boardrooms and made decisions that moved money across 3 states, and he had not known that somewhere in Houston his wife was pregnant and alone and working herself to pieces. Why didn't you tell me? His voice came out rougher than he intended. Why didn't you come to me? We could have figured it out. She looked at him now. There was no anger in her eyes anymore. Just something flat and certain. The expression of someone who has already had every version of this argument alone. Figured it out how, Siwon? With your mother standing over us? With your organization making every decision about what was safe and what wasn't? He went still. My mother. Your mother, Amara said, has everything to do with why I left. Siwan did not move. In 15 years of running one of the most dangerous organizations in the southern United States, he had learned to keep his face the way other men kept their money. Locked, protected, never where anyone could reach it. He had sat across from federal informants and smiled. He had received news of betrayals and nodded. He had built an empire on the foundation of never letting anyone see the machinery working behind his eyes. But right now, leaning against a brick wall in the alley behind his own restaurant, Amara was watching his face do something he could not stop. "Your mother," he said again. Slower this time. "She came to the house," Amara said. 3 months after our wedding, while you were at a meeting. She sat down at our kitchen table, and she smiled at me the way she always smiled at me, like I was something she was being patient about. And she offered me money to leave you. The alley was very quiet. "How much?" Siwan said. Not a question, a reflex. "Does the number matter?" "How much, Amara?" $2 million. She said it the way you say a fact about weather, already past the shock of it. She said I came from the wrong world, that I didn't understand what your family was, what your name carried. She said a woman like me would only ever pull you down. And she said, if I didn't take the money and disappear quietly, she would find a way to make my life very difficult. Siwan's hands, at his sides, were pressed flat against his thighs. "I didn't take it," Amara continued. "I told her no. I told her I loved you, and that was not something she could put a price on. She smiled even wider when I said that, like I had just proven exactly the point she was trying to make." Amara paused. "She said I was naive. She said love was a luxury your family couldn't afford." "Why didn't you tell me?" The look she gave him then was the most painful thing he had seen in a very long time. "I tried, Siwan." Her voice did not rise. It just went somewhere very honest. "I tried so many times. Every time I started to talk about your mother, about the way she looked at me, about the things she said, you shut it down. You said she was protective. You said she meant well. You said I was misunderstanding her, that I didn't know how to read her yet, that she was difficult with everyone and it wasn't personal." She stopped. "You said that, every time." He opened his mouth. "Don't," she said. "Don't tell me that's not true, because you know it is." He closed his mouth. She was right, and somewhere in the part of him that was not a chairman or a boss or a man in a suit, he had always known she was right. He had chosen the easier thing every time. He had smoothed it over, redirected, told himself it would resolve itself. He had been so practiced at managing everything outside his home that he had let everything inside it fall apart without once looking directly at it. "When I found out I was pregnant," Amara said, her hand moving to her belly in the unconscious way it always did when she mentioned the baby. Protective, instinctive. "I was so happy. I thought maybe it would change things. Maybe it would be the thing that finally made your mother see me differently. Maybe it would give us all something to come together around." She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that has nothing to do with joy. "I told her before I could even tell you. She came by the house and I told her. I was excited. I was stupid." "What did she say?" Amara looked at him steadily. "She told me she would take my baby." The alley went very still. "She said she had lawyers, connections. She said no court in Texas would allow someone from my background to raise a child with your family's name. She said she would make sure I never saw my baby again." Amara's voice remained even, but her hand pressed harder against her stomach. "And I believed her, because I had watched your mother operate for 2 years. I had watched her destroy a business rival in 6 weeks. I had watched her end a man's career with 2 phone calls. I knew what she was capable of, and I knew that if she decided to come for my child, she had the resources to do it." Siwan said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. Because every word she had just spoken was accurate. His mother was not a woman who made threats. She made announcements. So I left, Amara said simply. I left to protect this baby. I didn't know what else to do. He leaned against the wall across from her. He felt, for the first time in years, genuinely unsteady. Like the ground had shifted slightly under his feet and had not shifted back. I looked for you, he said quietly. I know. My parents told me. They said they didn't know where you were. I asked them to say that. She met his eyes. I begged them. I told them I wasn't safe. They didn't want to lie to you. My father especially. He was sick about it. But I convinced them. You weren't safe with me? The words cost him something to say. Amara, I would never... I know you would never hurt me. That was never the question. She shifted her weight slightly, adjusting to the geometry of the pregnancy the way she had clearly been doing for months. Small, practiced movements. The question was whether you would have believed me. If I had stayed. If I had told you everything, and your mother had stood there and said I was lying, no, said I was being dramatic, said I was trying to manipulate you. She stopped. Would you have believed me? He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say it immediately and completely, and with the certainty of a man who knew himself. But he stood in that alley for 5 seconds without saying anything, and Amara watched him not say it. That's why I left, she said gently. Not cruelly, just honestly. Siwan pushed off the wall. He walked 2 steps away from her and then stopped, his back to the alley wall, his face turned toward the dark Houston sky. A city of 7 million people hummed indifferently around them. Where have you been living? He asked. An apartment, East Side. How long have you been working here? Just today. My regular job closed for repairs. I called an agency. They placed me here. She paused. I didn't know you owned it. I didn't know until I walked out and saw you sitting there. Your regular job? I have 3 jobs. She said it the way people say things they have made peace with. Waitressing is the main one. I do cleaning shifts 2 mornings a week. And I do remote customer service from home at night when I'm not too tired. Siwan turned to look at her. 3 jobs, he said. While pregnant. Yes. How long have you been doing this? Since about month 3, when my savings ran out. He was silent for a moment, then, when did you last see a doctor? Amara hesitated, just for a second, but he caught it. Amara, when did you last see a doctor? I saw someone when I first found out I was pregnant. That was 8 months ago. I couldn't afford. That was 8 months ago. His voice did not rise. It went in the opposite direction, or dropping to something very low and very controlled, which was how people who knew John Siwan well understood that he was not calm at all. You are 9 months pregnant, and you have not seen a doctor since you were 1 month along. I've been careful. I know what to eat, what to avoid. I've been reading. You've been reading. He looked at her. Amara, don't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something broken. I've been surviving. I've been doing what I had to do. She lifted her chin, and he recognized that gesture. He had always loved that gesture, the way she refused to fold even when everything was pressing down on her. I'm still standing. So is this baby? He crossed the alley in 3 steps. Not threatening, not forceful, just close. Close enough to see the shadows under her eyes properly. The way her collarbones were more prominent than they used to be, the rough patches on her hands. Come with me, he said. I have a shift to finish. I'll cover the shift. I'll cover a month of shifts. I don't care. He looked at her directly. You need to see a doctor tonight. Whatever else is between us, we handle that separately. But tonight, you are seeing a doctor. You don't get to make decisions for me, Sewon. I know that. He held her gaze. I'm asking, not telling. I'm asking you to let me do this one thing. For the baby, if not for anything else. Amara looked at him for a long time. He watched the calculation moving behind her eyes. The weighing of pride against exhaustion. Of protection against the reality of what 9 months of working 3 jobs had done to her body. She looked so tired. Finally, she said, I go home tonight. Not with you. Not to your place. Fine. And this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean I forgive you, or that things go back to what they were. I know. And you don't make any more decisions without asking me first. Agreed. She held his gaze for another moment, looking for the lie in it. Then she took off her apron and handed it to the kitchen manager, who had materialized in the doorway at some point during the conversation with the diplomatic timing of someone paid to be invisible. I'm done for the night, she said. Sewon made 2 calls before they reached the front of the building. The first was to his personal physician. Not a hospital, not an emergency room. A private doctor who owed Sewon a significant courtesy and whose discretion was absolute. He spoke for 45 seconds, then gave the address of the city's finest hotel, hung up. The second call was to the hotel itself. This is Jeon Sewon. I need your best suite prepared in the next 30 minutes, and I need it stocked with food. Real food, not hotel minibar. Fruit, protein, soup, everything. He paused. Also a robe, the good ones. Amara was standing beside him on the sidewalk when he hung up. She looked at him with an expression that walked the line between gratitude and resentment. The best suite? She said. Yes. That's too much. It's not enough. His car was at the curb. His driver, a quiet man named Hanjin who had worked for him for 9 years, stood by the door. When Hanjin saw Amara, something crossed his face. Recognition, and then the careful blankness of a professional who understands his role. Ms. Amara? Hanjin said, gently. Hi. Hanjin? Amara said, just as gently. Sewon helped her into the car, not taking her hand, just being there in case she needed something to steady herself. She didn't take his hand, but she didn't move away from it either. They drove through Houston in silence. The city rolled past the windows, enormous and indifferent. The restaurant districts gave way to the hotel corridor, towers of glass and steel that caught the city light and bent it into something like luxury. Amara, Sewon said. She was looking out the window. Her hand was on her belly. She looked, he thought, like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had forgotten what it felt like to put it down. I know you don't believe me right now, he said. I know there's nothing I can say tonight that changes what happened. But I need you to know that I'm going to fix it. She didn't look at him. You can't fix 8 months, Sewon. No, but I can fix what comes next. You say that now. I mean it now. You meant things before. She finally turned to look at him. You meant your vows. You meant it when you said you would always protect me. You were sincere when you said those things, Sewon. I know you were. But meaning something and doing it are 2 different things. And you were never in that room when your mother was. The words landed exactly where they were aimed. The car pulled up to the Grand Hyatt. 40 floors of glass, the best address in Houston. A doorman appeared at Amara's door before the car had fully stopped. She looked up at the building. I can't stay here. You can. This is excessive. Amara. You told me you can hear rats in your walls at night. She went very still. You told me that, he said quietly. Just now, in the alley. Rats in the walls. 9 months pregnant. He paused. So yes, you're staying here. She looked at the building for another moment. Then she got out of the car. The suite was on the 38th floor. 3 rooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of Houston that made the city look like something that had been arranged for beauty rather than built for function. The food he'd ordered was already there. Fruit, warm soup, bread, protein, things a person actually needed rather than things a hotel thought looked impressive. A white robe was folded on the arm of the couch. Amara stood in the middle of the living room and looked around the way someone looks at a dream they don't quite trust. "I remember this," she said quietly, not to him specifically, to the air. "What?" "Rooms like this, having enough." She touched the back of the couch just lightly, like she was checking it was real. "I forgot what it felt like." Siwan said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. A knock at the door. He opened it to find Dr. Yun, a woman in her early 50s, calm-eyed, carrying a bag that cost more than most doctors earned in a month. She had delivered 3 of Houston's most powerful family's children, and asked no questions she wasn't paid to ask. "The patient?" she said. "Come in." Dr. Yun saw Amara, and her expression shifted into something professional and warm simultaneously. "Hello, I'm Dr. Yun. I'm told this is rather overdue. Shall we sit down?" Amara looked at Siwan. He stepped back toward the window without being asked. When giving them the room, he stood with his back to them and looked out at the city and listened. "When was your last prenatal visit?" Dr. Yun asked. A pause. "Month 1. A beat of silence. "All right, we'll cover everything now. Tell me how you've been feeling." "Tired. My back hurts constantly. Sometimes I get dizzy when I stand up too fast." "Are you eating regularly?" "When I can afford to, I try." Siwan's jaw tightened. He kept his face toward the window. "Any swelling in your feet or hands?" "Some, mostly at the end of a shift." "How long are your shifts?" Another pause. 12 hours, usually. Sometimes more." Dr. Yun said nothing for a moment. Then, professionally, "I'm going to listen to the baby's heartbeat. Is that all right?" "Yes," Amara said, and her voice, for the first time all night, was not steady. It had the particular fragility of someone who has been strong for so long that the smallest kindness cracks something open. The sound of the Doppler device being positioned. A moment of static. And then, thump, 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 thump. Fast, strong, steady. A tiny engine running perfectly. Siwan turned from the window before he could stop himself. Amara had her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were closed. Tears were moving down her face silently, the way they do when crying is not a choice, but a response. When the body simply overrides everything else. "Strong heartbeat," Dr. Yun said, and there was something warm in her clinical voice. "Your baby is doing well. Better than I would expect, given what you've been through." Siwan walked toward the couch. He didn't sit. He just stood near them, looking at Amara's face, at the tears, at the hand pressed over her mouth. "Can I?" He stopped. Amara opened her eyes and looked at him. Her walls, for just this moment, were simply not there. She reached over and took his hand, and she placed it on her belly. He felt it immediately, a push, firm, deliberate, unmistakable. His child, pushing back against the world from inside her. "Oh," he said. Just that, just the one sound. "He moves a lot," Amara said, her voice rough with tears she wasn't acknowledging. "Especially when I'm still, like he's been waiting." "He?" Siwan looked at her. "I don't know for certain. I always called the baby that. I couldn't afford an ultrasound." Dr. Yun completed her examination in quiet, efficient steps. Blood pressure, reflexes, a check of Amara's hands and feet. She asked her questions with the gentleness of someone who understood that she was speaking to a person who had been managing alone for a very long time, and deserved not to be made to feel the full weight of that any more than necessary. Finally, she sat back. You are underweight. Your blood pressure is low. You're showing signs of anemia and significant fatigue. None of this is irreversible. But Amara, you cannot continue at the pace you've been going. Not for another week, let alone until delivery. Your body has been extraordinarily resilient, but it has limits. I have bills, Amara said. She doesn't, Siwan said. Amara turned to look at him. Not anymore, he said. Whatever you owe, whatever you need, it's handled. I told you, I'm not taking... It's not charity. His voice was steady. That baby is half mine. I should have been providing for both of you from the beginning. This is 8 months overdue. Let me be 8 months overdue. Amara looked at him for a long, searching moment. Dr. Yun quietly organized her bag. I want to see you in my office tomorrow, Dr. Yun said to Amara, standing. Full examination, ultrasound, blood work. Everything we should have been doing for the past 8 months, we start tomorrow. She handed Amara a card. Personal number, any hour. Then to Siwan. Make sure she eats tonight. Soup first, then the heavier food. Her system needs to readjust. After Dr. Yun left, the suite went quiet. Amara sat on the couch with her hand on her belly, looking at the middle distance. Siwan stood by the window again, watching her. What happens tomorrow? She asked finally. I go to see my mother. She looked at him. She'll deny everything. I know. She'll say I'm lying. She'll say I'm manipulating you. She's very good at it, Siwan. She'll make it sound so reasonable that you'll start to wonder. I believe you, he said. She stopped. I believe you, he said again. I believed you in the alley. I don't need her to confirm it. I know what you went through, and I know my mother, and both of those things point in exactly one direction. Amara studied his face the way she used to study it, carefully, looking for the place where the composure stopped and the truth started. You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow, in front of her. And if she pushes back, if she threatens to, then I'll handle it. His voice was very quiet. That's what I should have been doing for 2 years. I'm starting now. Amara was quiet for a long time. The city glittered below the window. Houston at night. Enormous. Blazing. Indifferent. I'm not ready to trust you, she said finally. I need you to understand that. Tonight is tonight. The baby needed this. I needed this. She looked down at the card Dr. Yun had given her. But trust is not something you get back in one alley conversation. I know. It's going to take time, a lot of it. I know. And I'm not coming back to your world, Siwan. Not to that house. Not to those people. Not to sitting in rooms where I'm the only person who doesn't know what's really happening. You won't have to. She looked at him, trying to read the sentence. What does that mean? It means I've been thinking about what kind of life I actually want. He met her eyes. And it's not the one I've been living. She held his gaze for a moment, but then looked away. Don't make promises tonight. Not tonight. Just... She stopped. Just let this be what it is. One night where I can sleep in a real bed and know the baby is safe. Okay, he said. That's enough. He showed her the bedroom. She stood in the doorway and looked at the bed. Wide, white, still, like it was something she'd been shown in a photograph and not expected to be real. When's the last time you slept in a proper bed? He asked. I have a bed. When's the last time it didn't hurt your back? She didn't answer. Sleep, he said. I'll be on the couch. If you need anything. I won't. If you do. She went into the bedroom and closed the door. Siwan stood in the living room for a long time without moving. Then he sat on the couch, in the dark, and pulled out his phone. His mother answered on the second ring. Siwon. How was dinner? I heard Onyx was fully booked tonight. We need to talk. His voice was the one he used when a conversation was not a conversation, but a decision that had already been made. Tomorrow, my office, 8 o'clock. A pause. That's very early. Is something wrong? 8 o'clock, he said. Don't be late. He hung up before she could answer. Then he put the phone face down on the cushion beside him and sat in the dark Houston night and waited for morning. Inside the bedroom, Amara lay on top of the white duvet, still in her work clothes. She'd take a shower in the morning. She was too exhausted right now, too full of the evening's enormity to do anything but lie down. The mattress felt like something from a world she had almost stopped believing existed. She put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, lazy and rolling, the kind of movement he made when he was settling in for sleep. I know, she whispered. I know. We're okay tonight. She stared at the ceiling. I don't know about tomorrow. I don't know about any of it. But tonight, we're okay. She thought about the heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Fast and strong and real, filling that expensive hotel room like the most important sound she had ever heard in her life. She had held herself together through 8 months of fear and exhaustion and loneliness, and that sound had undone her in 45 seconds. Not because she hadn't known the baby was real, but because hearing it in a room where someone else could hear it too had made it a different kind of real. She hadn't wanted to cry in front of Siwon. She hadn't wanted to give him that. But she had, and he had put his hand on her belly. And the baby had kicked. And for just that one moment, in that ridiculous hotel suite, they had both been looking at the same thing. She closed her eyes. Sleep, when it came fast and deep and dreamless. The sleep of a body that has been running on nothing for too long and has finally, for one night, been given permission to stop. Siwon did not sleep. He sat on the couch until the sky outside began to lighten, reviewing everything he had been told and everything he already knew, and finding, in the space between the two, the full and terrible shape of his own failure. He thought about every time Amara had tried to tell him something about his mother, and he had not listened. He counted them, because he was a man who believed in precise accounting. There had been more than he wanted there to be. There had been a number that made him sit very still on that couch for a long time, not looking at the window. He thought about what she'd said. You were never in that room when your mother was. True, completely, undeniably true. He had been in meetings and on calls and in other cities, building an empire, while the woman he had married was being systematically dismantled in his own kitchen. He thought about the yellow bruising under her eyes, the rough hands, 3 jobs, 12-hour shifts, 9 months pregnant. He had let this happen, not by intent, not by cruelty, by exactly the most embarrassing kind of failure, by being too absorbed in his own importance to notice what was happening to the most important person in his life. By the time the sky was gold, he had made 3 decisions. By the time the sun had cleared the Houston skyline, he had made a 4th. At exactly 8 a.m., there was a knock on the suite door. Siwon opened it to find a young woman with a warm expression and 2 large bags. His assistant, Ji-young, who had been with him for 6 years and who had, without being told, already understood from the nature of last night's instructions that something significant had shifted. You called about clothes, Ji-young said. For Ms. Amara? I wasn't sure of her size. I gave you what I remembered from before. I brought several options. Ji-young looked at him with the careful neutrality of someone who will never ask a question she isn't paid to ask. There's also food coming up in 20 minutes from the kitchen. Breakfast? I gave them the doctor's instructions. Good. And you're 8 o'clock? I know. He set the bags inside the suite, woke the room service with a second call, and then sat back down on the couch to wait. At 8:25, Amara's bedroom door opened. She was still in her uniform from last night, but she had slept. He could see it in the slight loosening around her eyes, the way she moved differently, like her body had been returned something it badly needed. She looked at the bags near the door, then at him. Ji Young brought clothes, he said. Some options. You don't have to wear any of them. She looked at the bags for a moment, then, thank you. Food arrived 8 minutes later. Eggs, toast, sliced mango, warm soup, orange juice, herbal tea. More food than she had probably seen in one place in months. Siwon watched her look at it the way people look at abundance when they have been living in scarcity. Not greed, but something quieter and more complicated than that. A kind of remembering. Eat, he said. Please. She sat down. She ate slowly at first, and then less slowly. She didn't speak until the soup was finished and half the eggs were gone. What time is your meeting with her? She asked. 8 o'clock was the call. I'm already late. Go. I'll come back after. You don't have to. I will anyway. She looked up at him. What are you going to say to her? He buttoned his jacket, stood straight, became, in the way he could when he chose to, the version of himself that had built everything around him. The truth. That I know what she did. That you're back. That we're having a child. And that if she ever comes near you with a threat again... He stopped himself, because completing that sentence in front of Amara felt like the wrong register. But she heard the end of it anyway. She's your mother, Siwon? She's also the reason my wife spent 9 months pregnant and alone working 3 jobs. He looked at her steadily. Those 2 things exist at the same time. I can love her and still hold her accountable for what she did. Amara wrapped both hands around her tea. She was quiet for a moment. When you say accountable, I mean a conversation, he said. Not what your mind is going to right now. She let out a small breath. Go, she said again. Come back after. He paused at the door, turned back. The doctor's appointment is at 2. A car will come at 1:30. You arranged that already? Last night. She shook her head slowly, not quite disbelief. Something between that and the recognition of a person who does everything at a level of thoroughness that makes other people tired just to observe. Siwon left. His office was in a building that he owned on the 42nd floor of a downtown Houston tower. Officially, it was the headquarters of a private investment firm. The firm was real. The investments were real. The floor-to-ceiling windows were real, and so was the skyline view, and so was the standing desk and the single photograph on the wall. Not a family portrait, not an award, just a photograph of the Port of Houston at night, enormous and industrial, and lit like something that had decided to be beautiful by accident. Mrs. John arrived at 8:17. She was impeccable, the way she was always impeccable. Her suit pressed, her jewelry minimal and expensive, her posture, the posture of a woman who had never once in her adult life allowed anyone to see her tired. She was 61 years old and looked 50, and she moved through the world with the authority of someone who had decided, a very long time ago, that she would not be moved by anything she did not choose to be moved by. She sat across from his desk. You look terrible, she said. Did you sleep at all? No. What's this about, Christopher? She only used his English name when she was managing him. He had noticed this years ago and said nothing. I saw Amara last night. His mother's face went still. Not blank. Still. There is a difference. Blank is the absence of expression. Still is the deliberate removal of it. Amara? She said. Your ex-wife who abandoned you. She didn't abandon me. He looked at her directly. She ran, because of you. Mrs. John's chin lifted slightly. I don't know what she's told you, but she told me about the money, Siwan said. She told me about the lawyers. She told me what you said when she told you she was pregnant. His mother was quiet. She told me you threatened to take her child away from her. His voice stayed level. That took effort. She told me you said you had the connections to make sure no court in Texas would let her raise a child with our family's name. I was protecting... Don't. The word came out quietly, but it landed like a closed door. Don't tell me you were protecting me. Not right now. Not until I'm done. Mrs. John pressed her lips together. She's been living on the east side of Houston for 8 months, Siwan said. In a studio apartment, working 3 jobs, 12-hour shifts, 9 months pregnant, and she hasn't seen a doctor since month 1 because she couldn't afford it. He paused. She's been going hungry, Mother. My wife has been going hungry while pregnant with my child because you told her that if she stayed, you would take that child from her arms. The office was very quiet. You drove her away, Siwan said. You did it deliberately. And then you stood next to me while I told myself she didn't love me, while I went back to work, and pretended it didn't matter, and you said nothing. You let me believe a lie for 8 months. Mrs. John stood up. Everything I did because... She's 9 months pregnant with my son. He stood too. I'm going to be a father. In weeks. And I found out last night in an alley because my wife was too frightened of what you would do to tell me. He looked at her across the desk. That is what you've done. That is the actual result of protecting me. His mother's hands moved slightly at her sides. He had seen his mother in many situations. He had seen her negotiate. He had seen her threaten. He had once, when he was 8 years old, seen her stand in a hospital corridor after his father died and refused to cry for 4 days because she believed that the children needed to see that she was not broken. He had never seen her look the way she looked right now. I was afraid of losing you, she said finally. Her voice was stripped of its management, down to something smaller. She made you happy in a way I couldn't recognize. You changed when you were with her. You smiled differently. You stopped calling me first when something happened, and She stopped. Started again. I didn't know what to do with that. She was taking you somewhere I couldn't follow. I was in love with my wife, Siwan said. That's where I was. I know. The words came out barely above a whisper. I know that now. He came around the desk. He stood in front of her. He looked at the woman who had raised him alone after his father died when he was 10 years old, who had worked double shifts in a dry cleaning shop while building the connections that would eventually build their first legitimate business, who had never once asked him for pity or patience or acknowledgement of how hard any of it was. He loved his mother. He had always loved her. Amara is coming back, he said. Carefully, on her terms, in her time. But she's coming back, and our child is coming, and you have one choice about what that looks like, Mother. You can be someone who tried to destroy this family and then tried to prevent it from being rebuilt. Or you can be a grandmother. Mrs. John said nothing for a long time. I want to meet her, she said finally. I want to apologize. That's Amara's decision, not mine. Then ask her. When she's ready. He looked at her. And if she's never ready? If she decides she doesn't want you anywhere near her or our child? Then that is the consequence of what you chose to do. And I will support whatever she decides. His mother looked like she'd been struck. Even if that means you don't meet your grandchild for years. His voice was steady. Even then. Mrs. John sat back down. She looked for the first time in his life old. Not in age, in something else, in the recognition of a cost she had not fully calculated when she was spending. Siwan picked up his jacket. "I'll be in touch," he said. "When she's ready." He walked out of his own office. In the elevator down, he stood straight and still and looked at the numbers counting down and felt something he did not immediately have a name for. He named it on the ground floor. Freedom. That was what it was. The specific, slightly vertiginous freedom of a man who has finally stopped letting someone else decide what matters. He was back at the hotel by 1 o'clock. Amara was in the living room in the new clothes, simple, comfortable, a soft gray sweater and loose dark pants that accommodated the pregnancy. She looked like herself. Not the waitress from last night, and not the hollow-eyed woman in the alley. Like Amara. She looked at him when he came in. "How did it go?" "She didn't deny it," he said. Something moved across Amara's face. "She said she was afraid of losing me," he continued. "She was wrong. She knows she was wrong." He sat down across from her. "I told her that everything going forward is on your terms. That she gets to be part of this family if you decide she does, and not before." Amara was quiet for a long moment. "What did she say to that?" "She said she wants to apologize." "Of course she does." "I told her it was your decision." Amara looked at her hands in her lap. The baby shifted. He could see it, the slow rolling movement under the fabric of her sweater. "I don't want to think about her right now," she said finally. "Right now, I just want to go to this appointment and find out if my baby is okay. Everything else can wait." "Then that's what we do," Siwan said. The car came at 1:30. Dr. Yun's office was all clean lines and natural light, the kind of medical space that made the business of bodies feel less clinical and more human. She greeted Amara with the same warm steadiness she'd brought to the hotel room and led them into an examination room while her assistant quietly prepared the equipment. The full examination took 45 minutes. Blood drawn, blood pressure monitored properly, weight assessed, everything cataloged with the thorough, slightly catching up quality of 9 missed months of care. And then the ultrasound machine came out. Dr. Yun applied the cold gel to Amara's belly and moved the wand slowly. The screen flickered. And there he was. The baby filled the screen. Not a mystery anymore, not a heartbeat in the dark, but an actual shape, an actual person, a profile, a nose, a chin, hands tucked near the face with the particular peacefulness of someone who has no idea yet how complicated the world outside is going to be. Amara made a sound she immediately tried to contain. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Siwan sat in the chair beside the examination table. He looked at the screen and did not look away. "There's the head," Dr. Yun said. "Spine looks perfect. And look here." She moved the wand. "He's got his hand up near his face. See that? He's touching his own cheek." "He does that a lot," Amara said, her voice careful around the emotion in it. "I can feel it sometimes. From the outside. Zoit little movements near the top." Dr. Yun smiled. "Would you like to confirm the gender?" "Yes," Amara said immediately. "It's a boy," Dr. Yun said warmly. "A healthy baby boy." Amara closed her eyes. Tears moved quietly down her face. She had known somehow, had called the baby he for months without confirmation, some instinct that had been right all along. But hearing it said out loud was different, made it a different weight, the kind you could hold. She opened her eyes and looked at the screen again. "Hi, baby," she whispered. Her voice was just for him. "I see you." Siwan looked at the screen. He looked at the small face, the tucked hands, the absolute peace of this child who did not yet know what world he was being born into, or who his parents were, or how complicated and broken and trying to repair itself that world already was. "He's healthy," Dr. Yun said. "Given everything, He is remarkably, stubbornly healthy. His size is good, his positioning is good, his heartbeat is excellent. You have done everything right for this baby, Amara, under conditions that would have broken most people. She looked at her directly. Don't let anyone minimize that. What you've done for the past 8 months is extraordinary. Amara nodded. She couldn't speak. Dr. Yun printed the images, 4 of them. She handed them to Amara. I want to see you every 3 days until delivery. You're at 36 weeks. He could come any time in the next 2 to 4 weeks, possibly sooner. 2 to 4 weeks, Siwon said. Be ready, Dr. Yun said. Have a bag, have a plan. Know which route you're taking to the hospital. After she left them alone in the room, Amara looked at the printed images in her hands. The baby's profile, his cheek, his hand. She held them out to Siwon. He took them carefully, like they were something that might not survive being held incorrectly. He looked at them for a long time without speaking. His jaw was set in the way it got when he was working very hard at something. He looks like you, Amara said. He looks like himself, Siwon said. He's brand new. She almost smiled. Almost. What are you going to name him? Siwon asked. I've been thinking about Elias, she said. My grandfather's name. It means my God is the Lord. I was going to pair it with something Korean. She paused. I wasn't sure if that was... I didn't know if you'd... Elias, Siwon said. He tried the name in his mouth. Elias Jeon. He looked at her. It's perfect. She took a breath. Yeah? Yeah. They sat in the examination room for another moment, both of them looking at the pictures of their son, neither of them speaking. There was something in the silence that was not comfortable yet, not easy, not like before. But that was real. That was the quiet of 2 people sitting in the same truth at the same time, possibly for the first time. Outside, Houston continued its enormous, indifferent business. Inside, something that had been broken was beginning, very slowly, with no guarantees and a great deal of distance still to cross, to find its edges. 3 weeks passed. Houston moved through them the way Houston always did, loud, sprawling, convinced of its own importance, utterly indifferent to the private dramas of the people living inside it. The heat stayed. The city stayed. And slowly, carefully, like 2 people learning to walk again after separate accidents, Siwon and Amara found a rhythm. He had found her an apartment. Not his penthouse. She had been clear about that, clear in the specific way that means a boundary has been thought about and decided upon and is not available for negotiation. Not his world, not yet, maybe not ever on his terms, but somewhere safe, somewhere real, somewhere that was hers. It was in the museum district, a neighborhood of wide streets and old trees and the kind of quiet that money buys without announcing itself. 3rd floor. 3 bedrooms. Windows that caught the morning light and held it. A kitchen with a gas stove that actually worked. Floors that did not creak with suspicion in the night. No rats in the walls. He had asked her what she wanted in it before he furnished a single room. He had sat across from her at the hotel's suite table with a notepad, actual paper, because he understood instinctively that this was not a phone call conversation, and written down everything she said, the color she wanted in the nursery, the kind of rocking chair, whether she preferred blackout curtains or the kind that let in some light, what kind of mattress, whether she wanted bookshelves and where. He had written it all down and done exactly that. No additions, no upgrades she hadn't asked for, no grand gestures dressed up as practicality. Just what she'd said, executed precisely, because he understood, finally, too late but still, that the way to earn back a person's trust is not to impress them. It is to listen to them and then do the thing they actually said. Amara had walked through the finished apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, moving from room to room with her hand trailing along the walls the way she did in spaces she was deciding whether to belong to. She had stopped in the nursery doorway. The walls were warm white. The crib was the one she'd chosen, simple, solid, no fuss. The rocking chair sat by the window exactly where she'd said she wanted it, angled so you could see the trees on the street below while you sat in it. The shelves held a few books she hadn't chosen yet. He'd left them empty for that reason. And on the crib rail, placed there by his own hands the morning before she arrived, was a small yellow blanket. She had not told him about the blanket. He had found out from Hanjin, who had spoken to the agency who had sent someone to collect her things from the East Side apartment. The report had come back. 2 bags, not much, but there's a yellow blanket she keeps separate from the rest. Don't fold it wrong. He had placed it on the crib rail. Fold it the way it had been folded when it arrived. Amara stood in the nursery doorway and looked at the blanket for a long time. How did you know about that? She asked. I pay attention, he said, when it matters. She was quiet. I know that's new, he said. I know I should have been paying attention before. I'm not asking for credit. I'm just trying to show you what different looks like. She looked at the blanket for another moment. Then she walked to the rocking chair and sat down in it, heavily, gratefully, the way women in their final weeks of pregnancy sit in chairs, like the chair is providing a service. She rocked once, slowly, looked out at the trees. It's good, she said finally. The apartment is good. Okay. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. I know I don't have to. She looked at him. I'm choosing to. There's a difference. He nodded. He understood the difference. He was learning to understand a lot of differences. Dr. Yun saw Amara every 3 days, as promised. Siwon drove her to every appointment. Not Hanjin, Siwon. She had not asked him to. He had simply been there each time, at the correct hour, with the car. The first time, she'd looked at him with an expression that asked the question without words. He'd answered it the same way. Got out and opened the door. And after the 3rd appointment, she stopped being surprised by it. They talked in the car. Not about the organization. He was careful about that, rigorous about keeping that world away from her, understanding now in a way he hadn't before, that she should never have been anywhere near it. They talked about smaller things, about the baby's name, about what Elias's first year might look like, about the books on the empty nursery shelves. She told him what she wanted there, and he listened and ordered them that evening. They talked about his father, who had died when Siwon was 10. He had never talked about his father to anyone. He wasn't entirely sure why he started now. Something about the specificity of what was coming, fatherhood, arriving in weeks whether he was ready or not, made the subject press forward on its own. He was quiet, Siwon said, in the car after the 4th appointment, watching Houston move past the window. My father. He didn't talk much. But when he spoke, everyone listened. Not because they were afraid of him, because he was always saying something true. Amara watched him from the passenger seat. You miss him? Every day. He said it simply, without apology. Something he would not have done a year ago. I became what my mother needed me to become after he died. I didn't have a choice about that. But somewhere in that process, I stopped asking what I actually wanted to become. He paused. I think I was trying to become the version of my father my mother could control. Amara was quiet for a moment. What would your father have thought of me? Siwon looked at her. He would have liked you immediately. He would have seen what I was too blind to see. He turned back to the road. He would have been embarrassed by how I handled things. That makes 2 of us, she said. But the way she said it, not sharp, not bitter, just honest, was different from how those words would have landed a month ago. Something was shifting, slowly, without fanfare. The way real things shift. On a Thursday night, 3 weeks after the alley behind Onyx, Amara woke up at 2:17 in the morning. The pain was different from the Braxton Hicks she'd been having for weeks. This was not a practice run. This was the real thing, and her body knew the difference immediately, the way bodies know things the mind is still catching up to. She sat up, breathed, timed it, another one, 6 minutes later. She got out of bed, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone who is trying not to panic and is succeeding by approximately 60%. She walked to the window and stood there for a moment, looking at the museum district at 2 a.m. The trees still, the streetlights orange and quiet, the city somewhere between its two lives. Okay, she thought. Okay, this is it. She picked up her phone. She did not call 911. She did not call Dr. Yoon first, even though she had the number memorized. She called Saiwon. She had not planned to do that. In the 37 separate times she had mentally rehearsed this moment over the past weeks. During her shifts, during her walks, during the long 3 a.m. hours in the East Side apartment that now felt like someone else's life. She had planned to call Dr. Yoon first, to handle it herself, to demonstrate to herself and to him and to the world that she could do this alone if she had to. But at 2:17 in the morning, with her son arriving and her hands shaking slightly with something that was not entirely fear, she called Siwon. He answered on the first ring. Amara. Not groggy, not half asleep, fully present, immediately, like he had been waiting. I think it's time, she said. 3 seconds of silence. Then, I'm 7 minutes away. Your bag is by the door? Yes. Don't carry it down yourself. Wait for me. Siwon, I can carry it. Please, he said. Just that one word, not commanding, asking. Please wait for me. She waited. He was there in 6 minutes. He came up the stairs instead of calling her down. She heard him on the landing, heard the knock, opened the door to find him in dark clothes, his hair not quite all the way in order, a jacket pulled on over whatever he'd been sleeping in. He looked, for the first time since she'd known him, like a man who could not fully control what was on his face. He looked terrified, and trying not to show it, and failing, and somehow that failure was the most human thing she had seen him do in years. Okay, he said, looking at her. Okay, how far apart? 6 minutes when I called, probably less now. We need to go. I know. Can you walk? Siwon, I'm having a baby, not a stroke. Right, yes, sorry. He picked up the hospital bag, the one she had packed 3 weeks ago on Dr. Yun's instruction, the one that sat by the front door like a small, patient fact, and held the door open. They went down together. The drive to Houston Methodist took 11 minutes. Saiwon drove, and not fast, controlled, precise, running 2 amber lights with the calm calculation of someone who has assessed every variable and made a considered decision. Amara sat with her hand braced against the door and breathed through each contraction the way she had practiced, and between contractions she looked at his profile in the orange highway light and thought things she was not ready to say out loud yet. You're doing great, he said. You don't know that. I know you. He glanced at her. You always do great. She would have argued that, but another contraction arrived and took the available air with it. I'm right here, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Labor is not a metaphor. It is not like anything else. It does not prepare you by resembling something you've already experienced. It arrives on its own terms, and it stays until it's done, and it asks everything of you and gives you no guarantee of what it will leave behind. Amara went through 14 hours of it. Siwon did not leave, not to eat, not to take calls. His phone, at some point in the first hour, went into his jacket pocket, and his jacket went onto the back of a chair, and the phone stayed there silenced for the entire duration. 14 hours, during which the running of his organization, the movement of money across 3 counties, the management of an empire that never slept. All of it waited. None of it was as important as this room. He held her hand when she needed it held. He stepped back when she needed space. When she told him at hour 7 that she couldn't do this, he said, "Yes, you can," with such flat, certain conviction that it didn't sound like encouragement. It sounded like information, a fact he was sharing. You can do this. This is simply what is happening. She did not tell him he was helping, but she held his hand tighter. At hour 11, Dr. Yun arrived. She had been called at the start and had been monitoring, arriving now for the final stage with her calm and her warmth and her absolute professional competence. "You're almost there," she told Amara. "Your body knows what it's doing. Trust it." At 4:44 in the afternoon, on a Friday in Houston, Texas, with the city going about its enormous ordinary business outside, with oil deals and traffic and the port moving its cargo, and the courts processing their cases, and the restaurants filling with the dinner crowd, Elias Jeon came into the world. He announced himself immediately. Not a tentative sound, a full, committed cry, the cry of someone who has arrived and has opinions about it. The sound filled the delivery room, and Dr. Yun laughed, actually laughed, warm and real, and said, "There he is! Oh, there he is!" She placed him on Amara's chest. Amara looked down at her son. He was everything, and he was impossibly small, and he was looking up at her with the specific, serious expression of a person who has just arrived somewhere and is assessing whether it will do. "Hi," Amara whispered. Her voice was completely gone. "Hi, my boy. I'm your mama. Hi." Elias blinked, stopped crying, looked at her face. Siwon stood at the side of the bed, his hand still loosely holding Amara's, and looked at his son. He did not have words for it. He had words for almost everything, in 3 languages, all in the specific vocabulary of power and negotiation and strategy. He did not have words for this. There was no vocabulary in any language he spoke for the feeling of looking at a person who did not exist yesterday and understanding immediately, with complete and physical certainty, that he would do anything in the world to protect them. He understood, in this moment, why Amara had run. He understood it fully, in a way he had understood intellectually before, but now felt in his body, in the actual center of himself. She had run because this was worth running for. This child, this life, this small, serious face. She had run because no threat was too extreme to take seriously when this was what was at stake. She had done what he should have done. She had protected his son. When he couldn't. When he didn't even know to. "He's perfect," Siwon said. His voice came out low and strange, nothing like his normal voice. "Amara, he's absolutely perfect." "He has your jaw?" she said. She was crying and not trying to stop. "He has your eyes." "He just got here. You can't tell that yet." "I can tell." Dr. Yun worked quietly around them, efficient and unobtrusive, giving them the space of the moment without withdrawing the expertise of her presence. "Elias?" Amara said softly to her son. "That's your name, Elias Jeon. It means you belong to something bigger than all of us." She looked up at Siwon. "Can you—" She held the baby out toward him. Siwon went very still. "Take him," she said. "He should know your hands." He took his son, not the way he held things that were valuable, carefully, at a distance, with the control of someone managing an asset. So he held Elias the way something in him had always wanted to hold the things that mattered, the way he had been taught not to hold things. Close, fully, without pretending he wasn't afraid. Elias looked up at him, dark eyes, serious and new. "Hey," Siwon said. The word came out barely above a whisper. "Hey, I'm your dad." He paused. The room was very quiet. I know I wasn't there. For a long time I wasn't there. And that's something you and I are going to have to work through when you're old enough to understand it. But I'm here now. He looked at his son's face. I'm here now, and I am not leaving. Not ever. Not for anything. Elias made a small sound. Not a cry. Something smaller. A sound like a breath that had decided to have an opinion. Amara watched Siwan hold their son and felt the last locked room in her chest open. Not break. Not shatter. Just open, quietly, like a window being pushed up on a warm morning. She was not ready to call it forgiveness yet. Forgiveness was a process, not a moment, and she had learned enough about herself in the past 8 months to know that she didn't owe anyone a quicker version of her own healing. But this was something. This was real. This was the beginning of something she could not yet see the end of, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like possibility instead of danger. They stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Siwan slept in the chair beside Amara's bed. Or rather, he sat in the chair beside her bed and achieved something in the neighborhood of sleep. The light, ready sleep of someone who is resting but not fully releasing their post. Every time Elias made a sound, Siwan was awake before Amara was. He changed diapers with the concentrated seriousness of someone learning a new operational procedure. He held the baby while Amara ate. He figured out swaddling by the second night through what appeared to be sheer determination. Amara watched him do all of this and did not say anything about it. But she watched. On the second morning, she woke up to find Siwan asleep in the chair with Elias against his chest. Both of them out completely. The baby in the careful cradle of his father's arms. Siwan's chin tilted slightly down, as if even in sleep he was keeping watch. The monitor beeped softly. Morning light came through the hospital blinds in pale strips. She lay still and looked at them for a long time. Then she took a picture. For herself. For Elias, when he was older. For the record of this moment existing. Of this version of things being real. On the third day, they brought Elias home. The museum district apartment in the morning light was warm and still, and smelled like the candle Amara had left burning before they'd left for the hospital. Something soft, something that didn't announce itself. Siwan carried the car seat with the particular overcautious energy of someone transporting something irreplaceable. Amara walked beside him, sore and slow and deeply, bone-level tired, and deeply, completely happy. She sat in the rocking chair in the nursery. Elias slept in her arms, wrapped in the yellow blanket from the thrift store. Siwan sat on the floor beside the chair, his back against the wall, his legs stretched out, looking at them. He was quiet. He was good at quiet. But this was a different quality of quiet from the one she had known before. Before, his silences had the weight of withheld things. Decisions being made, calculations running, the machinery of him always working behind his eyes. This quiet was simply presence. He was simply here, not managing anything, not performing composure. Just here, looking at his son and the woman who had fought for 8 months to bring him into the world safely. I want to tell you something, he said. Amara looked down at him. Okay. I've been thinking about the organization. He paused. About what it means for Elias. What it would mean for him to grow up inside that world, the way I grew up inside it. Another pause. It's not something I can walk away from overnight. There are things that would need to be managed. People who would need to be transitioned. It would take time. Amara was very still. Elias made a small, sleeping sound. But I want to, Siwan said. I want to start that process. Not for you, or not only for you. For him. He looked at his son. I don't want to be what my mother made me be. I don't want Elias to grow up watching a father who chose power over everything and called it protection. He looked up at Amara. I watched my mother make that choice. I know where it ends. Amara held his gaze. That's not a small thing you're saying. No. It would take years. Yes. And people in your position don't usually. I know what people in my position usually do, he said. I've been in this position for 15 years. I know every version of how it goes. He looked at Elias. I also know that none of those versions include this. None of them have a rocking chair in a nursery in the museum district on a Thursday morning. He was quiet for a moment. I want this more than I want the other thing. I think I've wanted this for a long time. I just didn't know it was available to me. Amara rocked slowly. The chair moved with the faint rhythm of something old and useful. The trees outside moved in the morning wind. I'm not asking you to decide anything today, he said, or tomorrow, or this month. I'm just telling you what I want and what I'm going to work toward, because you deserve to know what direction I'm walking before you decide if you want to walk in it too. She looked at him for a long time. Okay, she said finally. Okay, you believe me, or okay, you'll think about it. Both, she said. Both of those things. 3 weeks after they brought Elias home. There was a knock at the apartment door. Saiwan answered it. His mother stood in the hallway. She looked different. Not in her clothes. Those were still impeccable, because some things are too structural to change overnight. But in her face, something had been removed from it. The management, the calculation, the constant positioning. What was left underneath was smaller and older and, he thought, more honest. She had a gift in her hands. Small, wrapped simply. She said she'd see me, Mrs. John said. Amara, she sent word through Ji Young. She looked at her son. Is that? Come in, he said. Amara was in the living room, Elias awake and alert in her arms, doing the thing he did now, where he looked at everything with the specific focused attention of someone taking inventory of a new world. She looked up when Mrs. John came in. The two women looked at each other. It was not a comfortable moment. It was not supposed to be. There was too much between them for comfort. Too much fear and too much harm, and too many months of a woman alone in a studio apartment with rats in the walls, working 3 jobs, going hungry. All of it traceable back to the woman now standing in her living room, holding a small, wrapped gift. Comfort was not available. But something else was. Mrs. John crossed the room slowly. She stopped a few feet away from Amara. She looked at the baby. Elias looked back at her. He had no context for the history in this room. He had no knowledge of what this woman had done. He just looked at her with his new, serious eyes and made the small sound he made when he was deciding about something. Mrs. John's face cracked open. Not dramatically. Not in the way of scenes. Just quietly, the way old things crack, along lines that have been under pressure for a very long time. He's beautiful, she said. Her voice was not its usual voice. His name is Elias, Amara said. Elias. Mrs. John tried the name. It's a strong name. I know. A silence. The real kind, not empty, but full of all the things that would take longer than one morning to say. I owe you an apology, Mrs. John said. She did not look away from Amara's face. She had decided clearly that she was going to do this without looking at anything easier. Not an explanation, not a justification. Those things are for my own comfort, and my comfort is not what matters in this room. She paused. I threatened you. I used your child, your unborn child, as leverage to force you out of my son's life. I told you I would take your baby from your arms, and then I watched you disappear and said nothing and let my son believe a lie for 8 months. Her voice was steady, but barely. I am deeply, genuinely sorry. For all of it. For the years before it too, the lunches, the comments, the money. For never once treating you as what you were, which was my son's wife, which was someone who deserved respect. Amara listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. She did not look away. She held Elias, and she listened, and she let every word arrive and land where it landed without managing it. When Mrs. John finished, Amara was quiet for a long moment. "I know what you were afraid of," Amara said finally. "I understood it even when it was happening to me. You were afraid of losing him. You'd already lost his father, and you'd built your whole life around Siwan and the idea of protecting him, and I came in and changed the equation." She paused. "I understand that. It doesn't make what you did acceptable, but I understand it." Mrs. John nodded. She did not try to speak. "I'm not going to pretend everything is fine," Amara said, "because it's not. What you did caused real damage. To me, to Siwan, to 8 months of Elias's life before he was even born. That doesn't disappear because you're sorry." She looked down at her son for a moment, then back up at Mrs. John. "But I'm not going to keep carrying the weight of it either. Not for my sake, and not for his." She looked at Elias. "He deserves a grandmother, not a perfect one. Nobody's perfect. But one who is trying. One who knows what she did and is working to be different." She met Mrs. John's eyes. "Are you working to be different?" "Yes," Mrs. John said, without hesitation. "Then that's where we start." Mrs. John looked at her, really looked, in the way she perhaps had never allowed herself to look before. Because looking meant seeing, and seeing meant reckoning with what she'd done to this woman. "May I hold him?" she asked, very quietly. The question of someone who knows they are asking for something they haven't earned yet and is asking anyway. Amara looked at Elias. He was watching a point on the ceiling with great interest. "Yes," she said, and she held him out. Mrs. Gian took her grandson for the first time. Elias regarded his grandmother with his characteristic seriousness. The look that Siwan recognized as his own and Amara recognized as somehow both of them and neither of them. Just Elias, just himself, already and completely a person. Mrs. Gian held him like he was the most important thing she had touched in years. Perhaps he was. Siwan stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room and watched his mother hold his son while his wife sat in a chair nearby, tired and strong, and still choosing, every day, to try. He thought about the version of himself who had walked into Onyx 3 months ago with Diane in a red dress and a phone full of business and a life that was, under all its power, profoundly empty. That man had frozen when he saw a pregnant woman in a waitress uniform, because some part of him, the part beneath the chairman, beneath the empire, beneath everything his mother had built him to be, had immediately, viscerally understood what he was looking at. Not a stranger, not an ex-wife, not a complication. The thing he had been missing. 6 months later, Elias learned to laugh, not smile. He had been smiling for weeks, at Amara mostly, occasionally at Siwan when Siwan made specific faces that he had discovered through trial and error were reliably effective. But laugh, the full, physical, whole-body laugh of an infant who has discovered that delight is available in this world and would like more of it immediately. The thing that made him laugh the first time was Siwan. Specifically Siwan making a sound, a low, resonant, ridiculous sound that he had invented purely in service of making his son laugh, and that he would have been completely unable to explain to anyone in his professional life without significant embarrassment. Elias heard it and lost himself entirely, laughing with the complete commitment of someone who has not yet learned that joy is supposed to be rationed. Amara heard it from the kitchen and stopped what she was doing. She walked to the doorway. Siwan was on the floor, the same floor he had sat on in the nursery, the same posture, the same casualness that had taken him months to allow himself. With Elias on his back on a playmat, and he was making the sound, and Elias was laughing, and Siwan was laughing too, in the way adults laugh when a baby laughs, unable to help it, the sound coming out of him unguarded and real. She stood in the doorway and watched them. She thought about the alley behind Onyx, about the hotel suite, about the ultrasound screen and the heartbeat in the dark, about the delivery room and the yellow blanket, and the picture she'd taken of Siwan asleep in the hospital chair with their son on his chest. About the morning Mrs. John had knocked on the door, and the afternoon Amara had realized she had stopped being afraid of what came next. She thought about the East Side apartment, the rats in the walls, the 3 jobs, the 12-hour shifts, the nights she had lain on her bad mattress in the dark and pressed her hand against her stomach and whispered, "We're okay tonight," to a baby who couldn't hear her yet and who she was terrified she wouldn't be able to protect. She had protected him. She had done it alone, and she had done it scared. And she had done it imperfectly and stubbornly and with everything she had. And then she had been found. Not rescued. Found. There is a difference. She had never needed saving. She had needed to be seen, and eventually, by the right people, in the right rooms, for the right reasons, she had been. Siwan looked up from the floor and saw her in the doorway. He did not say anything. He just looked at her with the expression he had been wearing more and more, open in a way that his face had never been built for, like a room that had been dark for years and was slowly getting used to the light. She crossed the room and sat down beside him on the floor. Elias saw her and reached for her immediately, his small hands opening and closing with the urgent vocabulary of a person who wants and is not yet embarrassed about wanting. She took his hands. He held her fingers and looked between his parents with enormous satisfaction, like a person who has arranged something difficult and is pleased with how it's turned out. He laughed. Siwan said, "I heard. First time." "I know." She looked at Elias. "I'll pretend I didn't miss it, so you can tell me the story." Siwan told her the story. It took about 45 seconds and was not, objectively, a very long story. But he told it with the attention of someone describing something that mattered more than it should. When he finished, Amara looked at him. "I forgive you," she said. He went still. "You already—" "I said it before because I meant it. I'm saying it again because I want you to hear it differently now." She held his gaze. "Not because we're in a hard moment and I'm trying to hold things together. Not because the baby needs it. Because I've watched you for 6 months choose differently. Every day. In the small ways and the large ones. Because you are not the man you were. Because you're trying, actually trying, in the way that costs something." She paused. "And because holding the rest of it, the pain, the fear, all those months alone, holding it serves nothing now. It just makes the room smaller." Siwan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was the voice she had heard in the delivery room, stripped of its armor, just him. "I don't deserve you," he said. "You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true." "Maybe," she said. "But you're here. You're present. You're on the floor of your son's room making ridiculous noises to make him laugh." She looked at him. "That's not nothing. That's actually almost everything." Elias, apparently feeling that the conversation had gone on long enough without his involvement, grabbed Siwan's finger with both hands and attempted to put it in his mouth. Siwan laughed. Amara laughed. Elias, delighted by the result of his actions, laughed too. In the story that started in an alley behind a restaurant called Onyx, with a Korean mafia boss frozen at a table, and a black woman standing in front of him in a waitress uniform with her whole survival written into the lines of her face. In that story, this is where the narrator is supposed to tie the threads and tell you what it all means. But the truth is simpler than a lesson. A man who was powerful chose to be present. A woman who was strong chose to be soft. A grandmother who had been ruthless chose to be humble. And a child who had been protected through 8 months of fear and sacrifice and stubborn, terrified love. That child laughed, for the first time, in a room with both his parents on the floor beside him. Some things are not about what they mean. Some things are just true. John Siwan had built an empire on silence and control, and none of it had made him rich in the way that mattered. He had been the most powerful man in any room he walked into for 15 years, and he had walked into the wrong one when he walked into Onyx that night and could not stand up when it counted. Amara Park had walked into that restaurant exhausted and frightened, and more alone than anyone should be, carrying a life inside her and a faith in herself that no one had given her and nothing had managed to take away. She had shown him what it looked like to love something more than your own comfort. He had spent 6 months learning to do the same. Elias Jeon had arrived into a world mid-repair, which is the only kind of world there is. He had laughed anyway. That, in the end, is everything.